Hey guys, it's Tom here from Pro Direct Running, back again with another super exciting super shoe release. This time it's from Hoka, so without further ado, let's get stuck into our full review of the all-new Hoka Cielo X1. Now initially you might be sat there wondering why on earth Hoka have come out with another top tier carbon plated PEBA based midsole super shoe when they've already got the really popular Rocket X2 that you can see behind me. Now that would be a fair question, but I think once you've listened to all of the points that I'm going to make in this review today, you'll understand that the Hoka Cielo X1 really is a worthy addition to Hoka's fast footwear collection. We've already got the Cielo Road, which for traditionalists is an absolute dream. It's lightweight, nimble, close to the ground, and really gives off those old school racing flat vibes, while still having a super modern PEBA-based midsole. You've got the Mach X with its dual density midsole makeup, composite plate, which I absolutely love for long runs, progression runs, steady runs, tempos, anything apart from all-out sessions and race day. This is a definite top pick for me. And obviously we've already mentioned it, but we've also got the Hoka Rocket X2, which is a massive fan favorite for good reason. It's aggressive, it gives you that real snappy, propulsive sensation that you're looking for in a super shoe, and you've seen it worn by lots of Hoka elite athletes over the past couple of years. Now with that said, with the addition of the Cielo X1, I really think that Hoka are now looking at having one of the most comprehensive fast footwear lineups of any brand out there. So then, jumping into some key info and stats about the Cielo X1, Hoka are very clearly positioning this as a road racing shoe from 10K up to the full marathon. And with the visual identity of the shoe, the silhouette, you can see why. Numbers wise, you're looking at a stack height of 39mm in the heel and 32? Yeah. You're looking at a stack height of 39mm in the heel and 32mm in the forefoot for a 7mm drop. Now, interestingly, this is actually a slightly different stack height to what we see on the Rocket X2, which has 40mm in the heel and 35mm in the forefoot. Now, a differential of a couple millimeters might not sound like a big deal, but I definitely think the increase in drop that we've got with the Cielo X1 has a really nice impact on the ride and the transition that you get through the gait cycle. As far as weight is concerned, I've got a UK 8.5 here. That's my usual size in Hoka shoes. And they were coming in on trusty kitchen scales at about 258 grams, which is definitely not the lightest super shoe on the market. But I think once we get into the nitty gritty of performance, you'll definitely be able to see why I still think that this is a top tier carbon plated shoe and that you shouldn't necessarily judge a book by its cover and take that weight as gospel. Now, if you know me, you'll know that as soon as I see a booty style construction upper on a running shoe, I get a little bit concerned about how it's going to fit my quite problematic feet. However, I'm really happy to report that with the Hoka Cielo X1, I think we've got a pretty much perfect blueprint of how to execute an upper of this nature. As I mentioned, I went true to size with a UK 8.5 here, and to be honest, I found the fit to be absolutely spot on. There's a really nice amount of volume in the toe box, which means your feet aren't feeling crushed and there's no pressure on the top of the foot. There's a good amount of room at the end to the point where you're going to mitigate any black toenails and any of that nastiness. And we've got a bit of padding at the heel and both the lateral and medial sides internally, which for me just creates a really nice snug hold around the ankle and Achilles area. The upper itself is a really nice and quite luxurious knitted material, which is actually on the thicker side for super shoe standards. And although very comfortable, this may contribute to what we see on the scales. Rather than being a one-piece type construction that you might see on shoes like the Alphafly, the tongue on the Hoka Cielo X1 is actually fully gusseted, which is a massive plus point for me. I found that once you lace these bad boys up, the tongue doesn't go anywhere whilst you're on the run, so full marks to Hoka for adding in that nice little gusset. Only other thing to add on that front, you've got a nice little pull tab on the tongue, which just makes ease of entry into the shoe that little bit easier. Interestingly enough, one of the wackiest things about the Cielo X1, apart from its visual appearance, is actually the laces themselves. They're not like any other material that I've seen on other super shoes or daily trainers from Hoka or any other brand for that matter. They're wiry, almost ribbon-like, and wouldn't look out of place in your nan's arts and crafts box. With that said, despite my initial reservations about the material utilised here, I actually think that the rigidity helps and contributes to being able to achieve a more secure fit and lockdown across the top of the foot. Overall, from a fit perspective then, absolutely no complaints from me, and these are definitely towards the top of the food chain when it comes to comfort in super shoes. So diving into the performance of the Cielo X1, I've been lucky enough to get a couple of runs in this shoe now, with the main one being a session of 10 by 3 minutes off a 200 meter jog recovery. Now, for context's sake, these were prescribed at about half marathon pace, which for me is around about 3:30 per K, and I kept the splits pretty even throughout, and the 200-meter jog was nice and easy. So I think for a shoe that's designed for 10K all the way up to the full marathon, it was a pretty solid first test of the shoe. I'll be completely honest, going into that session, I really didn't have a whole lot of information about the shoe. I hadn't seen any tech sheets. The leaks of the shoe have been pretty minimal from an actual information standpoint. And I found it really refreshing doing that session, as I say, without any real prior knowledge or preconceived expectations of what this shoe was supposed to feel like. Upon returning home from that first session, I did write some notes on my phone just to make sure that all of those very initial first impressions were fresh in the memory. And the overriding characteristic and sensation was just how much softer and how smooth they feel in their own right, but also when compared to the Hoka Rocket X2. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Rocket X2. I find it to be a super aggressive and direct carbon plated shoe with still enough softness for it to be comfortable over the longer distances. However, I would probably put it more in the category of 5K up to half marathon for myself. But I think the main thing that was notable with the Cielo X1 is with that difference in softness, this really does feel now like a full marathon distance cruiser. From a visual standpoint, I think it would be very easy to make comparisons to the Alphafly from a visual standpoint with this almost decoupled midsole design that we've got going on here. But indeed, underfoot, that pop-off and propulsion and softness that you get in the forefoot of the shoe in particular is also very reminiscent of that shoe. And believe me, that is no bad thing. Now, the official tech sheet that I've received from Hoka states that we've got a dual density PEBA-based midsole here, which is definitely interesting to note since on the Rocket X2 tech sheet, it states that we've got a full length PEBA-based midsole of the same density. Now, I don't have any specific information on whether this is a different formulation of that compound, but it's nice to know that we've still got gold standard PEBA-based foam here, and it definitely does feel softer from a durometer standpoint underfoot than what you find on shoes like the Rocket X2. One of the hot topics of any super shoe when you've got as much stack height as this is stability. And I'm happy to say that on my run with lots of tight corners, cambered pavements, your up and down curbs, I didn't have any issues. And I think that is in part due to the fact that we've actually got a pretty substantially wide base with this shoe. I will say that towards the end of that session, when I had a couple of reps left and there was some cumulative fatigue in the legs, I did find that when I was landing a bit further back towards the rear foot, that it didn't feel quite as stable. But I think you're always going to get that when your form starts to slip in a shoe with a PEBA-based midsole, which is nice and soft and compliant. So I think there's a trade-off there for sure. But for the majority of that session, I found it an absolute dream to run in. Outsole-wise, there's not a huge amount to report. We've got a fairly liberal coverage of rubber, especially up in the forefoot section with that entirely covered, which is very nice to see. And the high key wearing areas on the lateral side of the heel are both also covered. I guess the main thing to talk about is the voids that we've got in the midsole. It's common practice in super shoes these days. It enables to shave some grams, but it will also enable the shoe to store a little bit more energy when you're landing and allow that carbon plate to flex a little bit more, increasing the overall responsiveness and propulsion of the shoe. Traction wise, for my session, I was actually blessed with some uncharacteristically nice winter's weather. And the road was dry, so absolutely no issues with traction there. And I think even in the wet, there's a solid amount of tread here, so you shouldn't have any concerns. Ultimately then, I think the Hoka Cielo X1 shows that the brand really do have that secret sauce when it comes to cooking up a very, very good super shoe. In future iterations, I would obviously love to see the shoe drop some weight, but we can't have everything in this life. And I think from a performance standpoint so far, this is right up there as one of the best on the market, and it's a shoe that I'm already very much looking forward to getting some more miles in after this review. Anyway, that's just about going to do it for our review of the Hoka Cielo X1. Now, as is the case with a lot of recent super shoe releases, the initial drop of these is going to be pretty limited, but if you're looking to get your feet in a pair, you can do so on February the 1st at Pro Direct Running. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video and turn your notifications on so you never miss a future running upload, and I'll see you next time.